My name is Frankie Everett, and I'm a director in the regulatory team here in London at Field Fisher, and I'm an expert in technology regulation.
Hi, I'm Angus Heatley. I'm also a director in the London regulatory team at Field Fisher. I advise manufacturers on complying with new and developing product compliance regimes.
In this video, we're going to tell you a little bit about the Product Security and Telecommunications Infrastructure Act, which recently entered into force in the UK.
PSCI, as it's known, is the UK's new cybersecurity regime for connected consumer products. It affects the regulation of smart devices, and it aims to ensure that UK consumers are not put at risk from insecure technology products. The manufacturers of UK consumer connected products are required to comply with minimum cybersecurity requirements. So Frankie, who does the regime apply to?
Well, it applies to manufacturers of UK consumer connectable products, as you mentioned. We think that includes both manufacturers inside and outside the UK, but I'll come on to that a little bit later on. It also applies to importers and distributors, so retailers, other supply chain participants. And importers and distributors will need to ensure that only compliant products are made available on the UK market. The position for manufacturers outside the UK is a little bit unclear at the moment. So generally, UK legislation does not have extraterritorial effect unless this is expressly provided for. So entities that are established outside the UK, it will be difficult, perhaps impossible, for the regulator to bring enforcement proceedings against. Even if these non-UK manufacturers do not have any direct obligations under the Act, they will probably be caught indirectly, we think. And this is because importers and distributors will pass down those obligations through the deals that they make. So this will inevitably impose indirect obligations on non-UK manufacturers. So Angus, can you tell us about what products will be in scope?
Sure. So the regime applies to smart or connectable products, so it therefore has quite broad scope. In a nutshell, this includes all devices which can connect to the internet or to other networks. This includes smart TVs, games consoles, smart toys and baby monitors, smart home appliances such as washing machines and fridges. The requirements apply to relevant connectable products which are also UK consumer connectable products. These are products which are or have been made available to consumers in the UK and which are not used or second-hand products. Making available in this context includes advertising a product. So Frankie, what are the requirements of the PSTI regime?
Well, there's too many to cover in full detail here, but three of the key ones that you should know about is that the PSTI regs will impose security requirements for manufacturers in relation to passwords, which I'll come on to a little bit more in detail. Secondly, in relation to reporting security issues about the products. And finally, in relation to minimum security update periods, such as around an end-of-life policy. So taking passwords as an example, these must be either unique per product or chosen by the user. And there are various rules for passwords, which basically means that they can't be guessable. So things like they must not be incremental, 2, 3, 4, for example. They can't be based on publicly available information. They can't be based on serial numbers, for example, unless these are encrypted in some way. The other thing to know, and this will be particularly important for both manufacturers and retailers, is that compliant products must come with statements of compliance. And we think one of the key questions about the Act will be how those statements can be provided digitally. It's not really clear at the moment. So Angus, what actually counts as a consumer product? So will a business-facing product count, for example?
So a business product can also be a UK consumer product, even if a retailer positions the product towards business customers only. This can happen, for example, where products which are identical to the business product, so the same make or model, have been advertised or made available to consumers in the UK by another retailer. What this means is that an ostensibly business product can still fall within scope of the PSTI regime and would need to meet the relevant security requirements, and a retailer would also have to comply with its obligations under the regime in relation to that product. Frankie, what are the penalties for non-compliance with the regime?
Well, the relevant regulator in the UK is the Office for Product Safety and Standards, the OPSS. For the most serious cases, the regulator has the power to impose a maximum penalty of £10 million or 4% of the relevant company's worldwide revenue, whichever is greater. So quite a hefty power there. In the first instance, we would expect the OPSS to issue a formal notice requiring a product to be brought into compliance with the PSTI Act. In more serious cases, the regulator might order that a product should be taken off the market. It's worth noting as well that certain breaches of the Act, including failing to comply with the regulator's notice, are actually criminal offences, and responsible corporate officers may also be found liable. So Angus, can you tell us about the kinds of questions that you've been getting from clients about PSTI so far?
Although the regime has now taken effect, we're still receiving a large number of queries as clients struggle to adapt to the regime's requirements. Recent queries include: how does the regime apply to products which do not have and which may not need a password? How can statements of compliance be made available digitally? So can they be made available through QR codes or through a link enclosed with a product, or do they have to be made available through an integrated screen on the product? Where exactly the boundary lies between consumer products and business products? And finally, how can you ensure that your supply chain partners don't render an out-of-scope product into an in-scope product? So Frankie, what should businesses do where they think that either they or their products are not or may not be in compliance with the PSTI regime?
Well, given the potential penalties, we would suggest businesses speak with a lawyer, but we would say that, I suppose. If you think you might be in breach of the PSTI regime, you should consider your position carefully. And the exact decision as to what steps to take will depend on your risk appetite. Time will tell what enforcement approach the OPSS will take. It has a reputation for being a reasonable and pragmatic regulator compared to many of its overseas peers. But enhancing cybersecurity against malicious actors is a nationally important issue for the UK at the moment, so the regulator may come down quite hard. Angus, finally, how can Field Fisher lawyers help?
Well, we have a lot of experience in advising clients on how to comply with the PSTI regime. We also have experience in advising clients who are facing regulatory action, including from the OPSS, the regulator for the PSTI regime.
Our technology regulation team follows tech reg developments across the UK and Europe. This includes the EU's version of the PSTI regime, the Cyber Resilience Act, which will impose even more requirements than PSTI. So we might need another video about that. You can stay informed about the latest in cybersecurity, online safety, digital market regulation, AI, and consumer issues by accessing Field Fisher's Tech Reg quarterly updates, which we've linked in the post.
And if you have any questions on the PSTI regime or any of the other topics discussed in this video, please feel free to reach out to Frankie or myself. And lastly, thanks for watching.